I was not thrown out of the house with shouting. No slammed doors, no screaming matches, no neighbors watching from behind their curtains. I was pushed out with smiles, with congratulations, with soft voices and phrases like, "This is for the best," and "We're just being practical." The first thing I did after graduation was drive 3 hours north to a house the law still recognized as my safe place. My name is Elia Monroe, and that drive from my university campus back to Harbor Point, Maine had always felt like therapy. The highway would slowly give up its grip, turning into narrow coastal roads that curved like they were thinking instead of rushing. The city noise faded, the pressure faded. The Atlantic took over steady and indifferent waves breaking against rock the way they had long before any of us learned how to lie politely. But that morning felt wrong. I was still wearing my graduation gown, cheap black polyester scratchy at the neck, the kind they reuse every year and never bother to tailor for women. I had been too tired to change. I had tossed my suitcase into the trunk and just driven. When I turned onto the gravel road leading to my grandfather's house, the sun was just lifting itself over the water, casting bruised purple shadows across the silvered roof shingles. The house wasn't a mansion. It wasn't impressive in the way real estate listings like to brag. It was solid, built to survive wind, salt, and time. Just like the man who had lived there for 5 decades. I shut off the engine and sat gripping the steering wheel, telling myself I was here to rest. Just a few weeks before starting my new job in corporate risk compliance at a firm in Boston, I told myself I needed space to grieve properly, to breathe, to remember my grandfather in the only place where his absence felt quieter than his ghost. Then I heard gravel crunch behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. A luxury SUV rolled to a smooth, confident stop behind my dented old sedan. The engine purred instead of growled. That sound alone carried entitlement. I adjusted my graduation cap, still pinned awkwardly in my hair, and turned. My parents stepped out first, Victor and Elaine Monroe. They looked wrong here. Too polished, too deliberate. My mother wore a pastel dress that probably cost more than my final semester of tuition. My father checked his watch like the ground itself was billing him for standing on it. Then the back door opened. Sloane Monroe stepped out, my older sister, 2 years ahead of me in age and somehow decades ahead in entitlement. She wore oversized sunglasses despite the fog scanning the house like a buyer touring a foreclosure. She didn't look at me. She looked at the roof, the windows, the hydrangeas my grandfather had planted and never quite managed to tame. Elia, my mother, called her voice bright in that way that always meant something was coming. "We were worried. We thought you'd still be celebrating." "I just got here," I said. My voice sounded flatter than I expected. They didn't ask how the drive was. They didn't comment on the gown. They didn't say congratulations. They walked past me, into the house. Sloane brushed my shoulder as if I were furniture in her way. Inside, the house smelled like old wood-damp earth and the ghost of pipe tobacco that never truly leaves, no matter how much you scrub. The air was stale from being closed up since the funeral. My mother pulled the curtains open immediately, flooding the room with harsh light. "Oh," she said, waving a hand. "It smells old in here. We really need to pull up this carpet. It smells like him." I stayed by the door. "It smells like home," I said. My father ran a finger along the fireplace mantel, grimacing at the dust. "Deferred maintenance," he corrected. "Your grandfather let this place go. Elia, this house is a liability." Sloane didn't comment. She touched things, picked up the brass compass my grandfather kept on the shelf, ran her hand along the cracked leather of his reading chair. She looked like someone already deciding where to put a bar cart. So I said, cutting into the thickening silence, "What brings you 3 hours north? You didn't come just to criticize dust." My mother smiled nervously. "Don't be dramatic. We came to talk about your future." "My future starts Monday," I said. "I'm here to pack some of Grandpa's things and clear my head." "Perfect timing," Sloane said, leaning against the dining table. "Really?" My father cleared his throat and reached into his briefcase. That was when I knew. Folders mean decisions had already been made. "Elia," he said, pulling out a sleek, cream-colored folder. "You're 28. You're starting a high-pressure job. You're moving to the city. This house is a burden you don't need." "I can handle the taxes," I said. "I have savings." "For how long?" he challenged. 6 months a year. This is $1 million asset rotting on a salt marsh." "We discussed this as a family," my mother added softly. "I don't remember that discussion," I said. "We made an executive decision," Sloane said. She took the folder from my father and held it against her chest like a shield. "The house is in my name now," she said. "The transfer finalized this morning." She handed me the folder. I opened it. Stamped, signed, official looking. They watched me closely, waiting for the explosion. I didn't give it to them. I closed the folder carefully. Okay, I said. The relief on their faces was immediate. They thought I had surrendered. They didn't realize I had already moved everything that mattered weeks earlier, and Sunday was coming. They stayed less than 30 minutes. That alone should have warned me. My parents never lingered anywhere they didn't control. When they had finished saying what they came to say when the decision had been delivered and accepted, they lost interest. Sloane snapped a final glance around the living room, already imagining it stripped bare and reborn in her image, then checked her phone. We should go, she said lightly. I have a reservation in Rockport. We're celebrating. She looked at me when she said it just long enough for the message to land. Celebrating what they believed they had taken. You're welcome to come, she added. My treat. I think I'll stay, I said. I need to sort through my things. If the movers are coming Sunday, I have a lot to do. Sunday. That was when my father nodded satisfied. Fast is better, he said. Rip off the bandage. No reason to drag it out. My mother kissed my cheek, her perfume overwhelming the house's familiar scent. I'm so proud of you for being mature about this. We were worried you'd be sentimental. I am sentimental, I said. I'm just realistic. They smiled. They always liked me best when I used their words against myself. At the door, my father paused and looked back at me. Lock up tight. And don't worry about the utilities. I'll transfer the accounts to Sloane on Monday. Thanks, I said. They left in a cloud of gravel and entitlement. I stood in the doorway long after the SUV disappeared around the bend, listening until the engine noise faded completely, and all that remained was the ocean steady and eternal. Then I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt. And then the chain. The silence inside the house shifted. It stopped feeling empty and started feeling watchful. I walked past the living room where Sloane had claimed dominion, past the kitchen my mother wanted to gut, down the narrow hallway to my grandfather's study. The room smelled exactly the same as it always had. Paper, leather, tobacco, time. I sat in his chair. It creaked under my weight the way it always had, protesting, but holding. I reached into the pocket of my graduation gown. I had sewn the pocket in myself because women's clothes are designed as if we never need to carry anything important. Inside my palm rested a small brass key. My grandfather had pressed it into my hand 6 months earlier, his grip stronger than it looked. For when you need to be sure, he had said. The bottom drawer of the desk was locked. I unlocked it. Inside was a single thick navy blue folder. Not cream, not flashy. Serious. The cover read, The Arthur Bell Irrevocable Trust. Grantor Arthur Bell Trustee Elia Monroe Beneficiary Elia Monroe. I ran my finger over the date. Notarized and recorded 3 weeks before my grandfather died. The house at Harbor Point was listed as trust property. So were his investment accounts. The vintage car in the garage. Every asset my family believed they were about to strip clean. They thought they were playing chess. They didn't realize I had already taken the board. I sat there for a long time listening to the wind rattle the window frames. The sound had always comforted me. Tonight it sounded like a warning bell. Sunday, I whispered. They were coming back Sunday with movers. They were going to repaint the house white. Erase my grandfather. Erase me. I closed the folder and placed my hand on top of it. I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity. My phone buzzed on the desk. An email notification. Subject line security alert. Contact information updated. I opened it. The message confirmed that the mailing address on my grandfather's primary bank account had been changed to my father's office address. The timestamp read early that morning. They weren't waiting for Sunday. They were already stealing. I took a screenshot, printed it, added it to a black notebook I kept for work. I wrote the date and time in neat, unemotional handwriting. Then I grabbed my keys. I didn't need boxes. I needed a lawyer. The drive to town felt different than the one that brought me home. I rolled the windows down and let the cold, salt air keep me sharp. I changed clothes before I went in something forgettable and gray, invisible. The office was tucked between a bakery and a dry cleaner. No marble floors, no flashy sign, just a small brass plaque. Harper & Cole, Trusts and Estates. I didn't wait in reception. I knocked once and went straight in. Margaret Harper stood by the window, her steel gray hair cut blunt at the jaw. She wore glasses on a chain and an expression that said she didn't waste time comforting people who didn't need it. You're early, she said. They're moving faster, I replied, laying the screenshots in my notebook on her desk. They changed the bank address this morning. They're bringing movers Sunday. Margaret adjusted her glasses and studied the evidence. Classic, she said quietly. People who think they're entitled get sloppy when they're rushed. They showed me a deed, I said. They say the house is already hers. Margaret didn't look surprised. Of course they did. Paper is cheap. Validity is not. She slid a single-page document toward me. This is a notice of trust, she said. Once we record this today, any attempt to transfer title becomes a crime, not a dispute. I picked up the pen. I thought of my mother's smile, my father's certainty. Sloan measuring rooms in her head. I signed, Elea Monroe, trustee. Margaret scanned the page and uploaded it immediately. Done, she said. The registry timestamp is locked. I exhaled. Then Margaret frowned at her screen. That's interesting. My stomach tightened. What? There was a pending filing on the property, she said. Submitted this morning. Quit claim deed from your grandfather to your sister. I stared at the screen. He's been dead for 3 weeks, I said. Yes, Margaret replied, which makes this felony fraud. She turned the monitor toward me. The filing service name was cheap. Online. Automated. They backdated it, she said, and the notary stamp they used is flagged as expired. So they failed, I said. They failed, Margaret confirmed. And now they're exposed. I sat back, heart pounding. They walked into this themselves, I said. Greed does that, she replied. Now we wait. Driving home, I felt like I was playing a role. The obedient daughter. The defeated sister. The woman who said okay. I stacked boxes where they could be seen from the windows. Left books out. Left the house looking half cleared. My mother texted that evening. Proud of you. You're handling this so well. I replied with one sentence. Just going through boxes, lots of dust. A heart emoji came back. They believed the performance. Saturday passed slowly. Too slowly. Sloan stopped by with coffee and a form she wanted me to sign. Utility transfer, she said. I read the fine print. It wasn't utilities. It was a voluntary waiver of occupancy and a power of attorney. She tried to trick me into evicting myself. I told her I'd sign it later. She left satisfied. I locked the form in my suitcase. That night my phone buzzed again. Another alert. Title inquiry detected. They were trying again. I looked out at the dark ocean and whispered to my reflection in the window. Try harder. Tomorrow they were coming with a truck. And this time they were going to learn the difference between thinking you own something and actually owning it. I barely slept that night. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind refused to slow down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents' faces from Friday afternoon. The relief, the satisfaction, the certainty that I had folded exactly the way I always did. Okay, that word had followed me my entire life. Okay when they forgot my birthday because Sloan had a photo shoot. Okay when my college fund quietly shrank while her acting coach invoices grew. Okay when I drove 3 hours north every other weekend to sit beside my grandfather's hospital bed while they sent flowers and apologies. Okay was how I survived. But Sunday was not about survival. Sunday was about exposure. I was awake before dawn, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of black coffee growing cold in my hands. The ocean outside was gray and restless fog crawling low over the water like it was hiding something. The house creaked as if stretching, aware that something was coming. I opened my black notebook and wrote the date, Sunday. Then I wrote the plan. Do not argue. Do not explain. Do not reveal the trust until they cross the line. They would cross it. People like my family always did. At exactly 8 in the morning, I heard engines. Not 1, 3. My father's SUV came first, aggressive and impatient. Behind it, a smaller sedan I didn't recognize. And then the moving truck, massive and loud, its diesel engine growling like it already owned the driveway. I stood on the porch with my arms folded. They got out like a coordinated team. My father immediately started giving directions to the driver, pointing at the house as if it were already inventory. My mother hovered near Sloan, adjusting her collar, whispering something I couldn't hear. Sloan stepped out, last sunglasses on, red lipstick perfect despite the fog. She smiled when she saw me. Not a kind smile, a victorious one. Morning my father called, ready. I didn't answer. Sloan clapped her hands once. Okay, guys, she said to the movers. Living room first. The leather chairs, the oak table, the grandfather clock. Careful with that one. The men nodded indifferent. This was just another job to them. Wait, I said. My voice cut through the air sharper than I expected. The foreman paused on the bottom step. He looked at me, then at my father. Elea, my father warned, don't do this. Do what I asked calmly. Ask why strangers are about to empty a house I'm still legally occupying. Sloan laughed. We've been over this. The house is mine. We showed you the paperwork. She turned to the movers. Go ahead. The foreman hesitated. That was when another car pulled into the driveway. A black sedan. It parked sideways, blocking the exit. The driver's door opened. Margaret Harper stepped out. She didn't rush. She didn't look around. She walked up the driveway like someone who knew exactly where she was going. Behind her, a man in a government-issued jacket got out holding a tablet. This property is not available for removal of assets, Margaret said evenly. Step away from the house. The foreman froze. My father's face darkened. Who the hell are you? Margaret didn't look at him. "I'm the attorney for the Arthur Bell Irrevocable Trust," she said, "and this is a clerk from the county registry." Trust. The word landed like the dropped plate. Sloane's smile faltered. "There is no trust," she snapped. "We have a deed." She grabbed the folder and shoved it toward Margaret. Margaret didn't take it. She looked at me. "As trustee, do you authorize removal of property?" "No," I said. That was it. That single word. "No." The foreman stepped back immediately. "Yeah, I'm not touching this," he said. "I'm not losing my license." My mother gasped. "This is absurd. She's lying. My father never made a trust." "He did," the clerk said quietly, tapping his tablet. "Recorded 3 weeks ago. The property was transferred into the trust before his death." My father's face drained of color. "That's impossible," he said. "We have a signed document." The clerk held out his hand. "May I see it?" Sloane hesitated. I watched the calculation flicker behind her eyes. Then she handed it over. The clerk studied it slowly. Too slowly. The silence stretched until even the movers stopped shifting their weight. "This notary stamp is expired," the clerk said finally, "and the commission number belongs to a different individual." Sloane's breath caught. "And this signature date places Arthur Bell in intensive care," the clerk continued. "Hospital records confirm he was incapacitated." My mother sat down hard on the porch steps. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. The foreman shook his head. "Job's canceled," he said. "We're out." The truck engine roared to life again. They didn't argue. They didn't wait. They left. One by one, the props disappeared. The movers. The fake notary who slipped into his car and fled without a word. All that remained were my parents and my sister standing on gravel that suddenly felt very unstable. "You planned this," Sloane hissed, turning on me. "You let us come." "I let you tell the truth," I said. "You just didn't like how it sounded." My father took a step toward me. "We're your family," he said, desperation breaking through the anger. "You can't do this." "I didn't," I replied. "You did. You just didn't expect consequences." Margaret handed my father an envelope. "This is a cease and desist," she said. "You are no longer permitted on this property. Any further attempts to interfere will be treated as criminal." My father stared at it like it was written in another language. My mother started crying, real crying this time. Sloane didn't cry. She stared at the house, at the thing she thought would save her. "You think this is over?" she said quietly. "It's not." I believed her. People who lose like this never stop quietly. They retreat. They regroup. They get desperate. I watched them leave. The driveway emptied. The fog began to lift. The house stood behind me intact. For the first time since Friday, I let myself breathe. But deep in my chest, something cold settled, because I knew what came next. They wouldn't come back with movers. They would come back with lawyers. And secrets always surface when money runs out. The silence after they left felt unnatural, not peaceful, not calm. Pressurized, like the air before a storm that everyone pretends isn't coming. I stood on the porch long after their cars disappeared, watching the fog thin and drift away. The ocean resumed its steady rhythm, indifferent to family drama and fraud. The house behind me felt larger than it had an hour earlier, not because it had changed, but because I finally understood what it was. Not an inheritance, a boundary. I locked the door and went inside. I didn't sit down. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I cleaned. I moved through the house with deliberate focus, closing windows, checking locks, grounding myself in physical motion. When I reached the study, I opened the desk drawer and took out the trust folder again. I laid it flat, smoothing the cover like it was a living thing. "You're safe," I said quietly, though I wasn't sure if I meant the house or myself. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "How could you do that to us, dragging officials here? Humiliating your father in front of strangers." I didn't reply. Another message followed almost immediately. "You've changed. This isn't who you are." I stared at the screen. No, I thought. This is exactly who I am. You just never benefited from it before. I set the phone face down and picked up the black notebook. Sunday, 10:15 in the morning. Attempted removal of trust property. Fake deed presented. Expired notary. Movers withdrawn. I wrote without emotion. Emotion clouds timelines. Timelines expose patterns. The next message came from my father. "You crossed a line today. You think lawyers will protect you forever? Family remembers betrayal." That one almost worked. Almost. Because part of me still wanted him to say something else. Something human. Something like, "I'm sorry," or "We went too far." Instead, he reached for fear. I screenshot the text and added it to the file. By late afternoon, the calls started. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly remembered my number. Voices thick with concern, preloaded with judgment. "Your mother is devastated. Your sister is under a lot of stress. You shouldn't air private matters like that." Every conversation followed the same script. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I listened until they ran out of breath, then said, "This is a legal matter. Please don't contact me again." Then I blocked them. By evening, the tone shifted. The emotional pressure gave way to formality. A courier arrived just before sunset with a thick envelope bearing a law firm's logo I recognized. Mid-tier, aggressive letterhead, designed to intimidate people who didn't know better. I opened it at the kitchen table. They accused me of undue influence, claimed I had manipulated my grandfather during his final days, that I had isolated him, coerced him, confused him. They demanded immediate negotiations and threatened civil action for emotional distress. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was desperate. I called Margaret. "They're threatening to sue," I said. I expected that she replied calmly. "They have no case. We documented capacity. We have witnesses. They're throwing noise to see if you flinch." "What do I do?" "Nothing," she said. "You let me respond. You do not engage. You do not defend. Silence is power right now." Silence. The words settled differently this time. This wasn't the silence of submission I'd learned as a child. This was strategic silence. That night I slept deeply. The kind of sleep that comes when your body finally believes the immediate danger has passed. Monday morning arrived sharp and bright. The fog was gone. The ocean sparkled like it was mocking me. My phone buzzed before I even made coffee. An email forwarded from Margaret. Their lawyer withdrew representation. No explanation. Just gone. I smiled for the first time since graduation, but the relief didn't last, because at noon my phone rang. Sloan! I stared at her name on the screen until it stopped. Then it rang again. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice cracked through the speaker. "Ilaya, please, I need to talk to you. This isn't about the house, I swear." I closed my eyes. Every important lie in my family started with that sentence. She called again an hour later. This time I answered. "What do you want?" I asked. She exhaled shakily. "I'm in trouble." "What kind?" I asked. The pause told me everything. "Money," she whispered. "How much?" Another pause. 300,000, she said. "Not an estimate." A number. Specific, heavy. "And you thought the house would fix that," I said. "Yes," she admitted. "I already promised it. I thought Dad would handle the paperwork. I didn't think you'd fight." "I didn't fight," I said. "You attacked." "They're not like banks," she said quickly. "They don't wait. They don't renegotiate. If I don't pay by the end of the week..." She stopped. "You took out a hard loan," I said, "didn't you?" Silence. "You used the house as collateral," I continued. "A house you didn't own." "They said it would be temporary," she sobbed. "Just a bridge. I was going to flip 2 properties. It went wrong." I leaned back in my chair. Everything snapped into focus. The urgency, the Sunday deadline, the fake deed, the movers. This wasn't about inheritance. It was about laundering panic. "I can't help you," I said. "You can," she insisted. "You're the trustee. You can dissolve the trust. You can transfer it. I'll pay you back, I swear." "No," I said. Her voice sharpened. "If you don't, this ruins me." I thought of my grandfather, of the way he had pressed the key into my hand, of the house standing against wind and salt without apology. "You already ruined yourself," I said quietly. "You just wanted me to pay for it." She screamed. Then she hung up. I sat there, phone still warm in my hand. This wasn't over. Not even close. Because now I understood the real danger. People who owe money to institutions panic. People who owe money to predators do worse. And Sloan had just lost the one thing she thought could save her. The house felt different after they left. Not quieter, not calmer, sharper. Like a blade set down on a table, no longer swinging, but very much still dangerous. I stood in the doorway long after the gravel settled, my eyes fixed on the curve of the coastal road where my family's cars had disappeared. The Atlantic rolled in slow, heavy breaths, unconcerned with forged deeds or blood ties. The wind tugged at my graduation gown, still hanging on a chair by the door, as if reminding me that I had crossed a threshold that had nothing to do with school. Inside, the silence pressed in. This was the silence I had always known growing up. The silence after a decision had been made without me. The silence where questions weren't welcome and obedience was expected. But this time it belonged to me. I locked the door. Then I checked it again. Then I walked the perimeter of the house, room by room, touching familiar objects, the way someone touches walls during an earthquake, needing proof that something solid still exists. The grandfather clock still ticked in the hallway. The floorboard outside the study still creaked if you stepped on the wrong edge. The house hadn't changed. I had. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my black notebook. Sunday, 8:15 in the morning. Attempted removal of property by non-owners. Fake deed presented. Movers disengaged. County clerk confirmed trust ownership. I wrote slowly, carefully, without adjectives. At work, we called this creating a defensible timeline. Facts only, no feelings. Feelings gave people leverage. My phone buzzed face down on the table. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. When I finally turned it over, the screen was full. My mother, my father, Sloan. Missed calls, text messages, voicemails. I opened my mother's first. Her voice was high, breathless, vibrating with outrage wrapped in concern. "How could you do this to us, Elia? Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? You brought officials into a family matter. Your father was made to look like a criminal." I stopped the message. I already knew the rest. I opened my father's text. "You've crossed a line. You think lawyers make you untouchable. Family remembers betrayal." I felt something in my chest tighten, then release. There it was. I'm sorry, not. We went too far. A threat. I took a screenshot and added it to the file. Then I blocked both of them. The next few hours unfolded exactly the way Margaret had predicted. The flying monkeys arrived. An aunt I hadn't spoken to in years called to tell me I was being selfish. A cousin messaged to remind me that family assets should be shared. Someone even used the word hoarding. Hoarding. As if my grandfather's life were clutter. I responded to none of them. Silence is unbearable to people who live on control. By late afternoon, the emotional pressure shifted into something colder. A courier arrived just before sunset. He handed me a thick envelope with a city law firm's name embossed on the corner. The kind of firm that specialized in intimidation, not litigation. I opened it alone at the kitchen table. They accused me of undue influence, claimed I had manipulated my grandfather in his final weeks, that I had isolated him, that I had coerced him into signing documents he did not understand. They demanded an immediate negotiation meeting to preserve family harmony. I laughed, out loud. It echoed strangely in the empty kitchen. I called Margaret. "They're accusing me of undue influence," I said. "I know," she replied calmly. "I already received a copy." "They want to negotiate." "They want to scare you," she corrected. "They don't have a case. They're trying to drown you in paper so you'll give them something just to make it stop." "What should I do?" "Nothing," she said. "I'll respond. You don't engage. From now on, any direct contact from them gets logged and ignored." When I hung up, the house felt steadier. Not warm, steady. That night, for the first time since my grandfather died, I slept without dreaming. Monday morning arrived bright and brutally clear. The fog was gone. The sky was almost offensively blue. I made coffee and drank it slowly, standing at the sink, watching gulls fight over something invisible on the shoreline. At 9:30, my phone buzzed. An email from Margaret. "Opposing counsel has withdrawn. No explanation given." I closed my eyes and exhaled. They were running out of options. But desperation has a way of revealing truths people work hard to hide. At noon, my phone rang again. Sloan. I stared at her name until it stopped. Then it rang again. This time I answered. What I said. Her voice was nothing like the one I had grown up with. It wasn't sharp or amused or superior. It was cracked. "I need to talk to you," she said, "please," about what I asked. "This isn't about the house," she rushed. "I swear." I leaned against the counter. "Then talk." Silence stretched on the line long enough for me to hear her breathing. "I'm in trouble," she said finally. "What kind?" I asked. A pause. "Financial." "How much?" I asked. Another pause, longer this time. 300,000, she whispered. "Not approximately. Not around. Exact." My stomach dropped. "And you thought the house would fix that," I said. "Yes," she said quickly. "I already told them it would. Dad said the paperwork was handled. I thought you'd just leave." "Who is them?" I asked. She hesitated. That told me everything. "Hard money," I said. "Private lender." Her silence confirmed it. "You used the house as collateral," I said. "A house you didn't own." "They said it was temporary," she cried. "Just a bridge loan. I was flipping 2 properties. One deal collapsed. The other got delayed. I just needed time." I closed my eyes. The urgency, the Sunday deadline, the forged deed. This wasn't greed. This was panic laundering itself as entitlement. "I can't help you," I said. "You can," she insisted. "You're the trustee. You can dissolve the trust. You can transfer the asset. I'll pay you back, I swear." "No," I said. "If you don't," she said, her voice breaking, "this ruins me." I thought of my grandfather, of the way he had looked at me the last time we sat together in the study, of the key in my pocket. "You already ruined yourself," I said quietly. "You just wanted me to absorb the damage." She started screaming. I hung up. I didn't cry. I stood very still, listening to the ocean slam into the rocks. Now I knew the truth. This wasn't over because now there was money owed to people who don't send letters. And when predators don't get paid, they don't threaten. They collect. Once you know the real reason people are desperate, everything they've done suddenly makes sense. The fake deed, the rush, the Sunday morning ambush. They weren't trying to win an inheritance dispute. They were trying to stop a countdown. I didn't sleep much that night, but it wasn't the restless, spiraling kind of insomnia I'd lived with most of my life. This was alertness, the kind that keeps your senses sharp and your thoughts clean. I checked every lock in the house twice. Then I did something I had never done before. I turned on every light, not because I was afraid of the dark, but because I refused to sit in shadows, waiting for consequences that weren't mine. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a new email. Not from my family. From Margaret. Subject line urgent. I opened it immediately. She had forwarded a message from a compliance officer at First Coastal Bank, the bank my grandfather had used for decades. Elia, a suspicious loan application was flagged this afternoon involving Harbor Point property as collateral. Application submitted 1 week post-mortem, pending verification of title transfer. Applicant Sloan Monroe. Co-signing entity Obsidian Ridge Holdings. My hands went cold. Obsidian Ridge. That wasn't a normal lender. That wasn't even a borderline lender. That was shadow money. People who loan to gamblers, failed developers, and clients traditional banks won't touch. High interest, short deadlines, consequences that don't involve courtrooms. Margaret called seconds later. They've been trying to mortgage the house for 2 weeks, she said without preamble. They needed the deed cleared by Monday morning for the funds to release. That's why Sunday mattered, I said. Yes, she replied. And that's why this just became more serious. I sat down heavily at the kitchen table. They're not just embarrassed, she continued. They're cornered. And cornered people make dangerous decisions. You think they'll come back, I said. I think Margaret said carefully that Sloan owes money to people who don't care about family dynamics or probate law. I closed my eyes. So what do? You secure yourself, she said. Tonight, lock everything. I'm arranging a private patrol to drive by the property until Monday. And tomorrow morning we file a formal fraud notice tied to the loan attempt. What happens then? Then the banking system does what it always does, she said. It starts asking questions your family can't answer. After we hung up, I sat in the study for a long time staring at the navy blue trust folder. I wasn't scared for myself. I was scared of what desperate people might do when they realize their only escape has disappeared. The next morning, the patrol car arrived just after dawn. Unmarked. Boring. Exactly what it needed to be. It parked at the end of the driveway, visible but unobtrusive. I made coffee and sat by the window. At 10:15, my phone rang. Sloan again. I didn't answer. She texted, "Please, you have to talk to me. I'm begging you." I didn't reply. At 11, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was different than before. Lower, controlled. Elia, he said we need to discuss options. This has gone too far. You're putting your sister in danger. There it was. Not apology. Not accountability. Blame. I forwarded the voicemail to Margaret. Her reply came back fast. Good. He's admitting knowledge of the debt. Keep everything. By afternoon, the pressure shifted again. No more calls. No more texts. Silence. That silence was not peace. It was recalculation. At 3:30, Margaret called me. I need you to listen carefully, she said. I confirmed something. My stomach tightened. Sloan didn't just borrow money, she continued. She misappropriated client funds trying to cover early losses. Obsidian Ridge threatened exposure if she didn't repay by Monday. So she used the house as a shield, I said. Yes, Margaret replied. She assumed she could force the transfer mortgage at repay them and clean everything before anyone noticed. And now she can't. No, Margaret said. Now she's exposed from every angle. I stood up and paced the room. So what happens next? They panic, Margaret said. Your parents already tried fraud. Sloan tried manipulation. The next move is usually guilt or threats. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A message from Sloan. If you don't help me, everything comes out. And when it does, they'll drag your name into it too. Think about that. I stared at the screen. That was her final card. Fear, I typed slowly. My name is clean, yours isn't. Do not contact me again. I blocked her. My hands were steady. That night the ocean was violent. Waves slammed into the rocks like they were trying to break the shoreline itself. Wind howled around the house, rattling windows and shaking the old beams. I sat in my grandfather's chair with a blanket over my shoulders and the trust folder open on the desk. For the first time, I felt something close to grief. Not for my parents, not for Sloan, but for the illusion that blood protects you. It doesn't. Structure does. Boundaries do. Documentation does. Monday morning was coming. The deadline for the loan. The deadline for lies. And the day my family would realize that the house they tried to steal wasn't just unavailable. It was evidence. Monday arrived without drama. No thunder, no rain, just a clean, unforgiving blue sky that made everything visible. I woke before the alarm, already dressed, already braced. The patrol car was gone from the end of the driveway, but its absence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like confirmation that the night had passed without escalation. The real reckoning wouldn't happen at my house. It would happen in offices with bad coffee and good records. At 8 in the morning, Margaret called. "They're making noise," she said. "Not to us, to everyone else." I sat at the kitchen table, notebook open. "What kind of noise?" "Your parents contacted 2 different firms trying to retain counsel," she replied. "Both declined once they saw the preliminary fraud flags. One attorney forwarded me the inquiry out of courtesy." That was new. Lawyers don't do favors unless something smells bad enough to protect themselves. "So they're boxed in," I said. "More than they realize," Margaret replied. "The bank escalated the loan application to internal investigations this morning. Obsidian Ridge is asking questions." And Sloan missed the payment window. I closed my eyes. "So what happens now?" Margaret paused. "Now the predators turn on the weakest link." I didn't need to ask who that was. At 9:30 my phone rang. "Unknown number," I answered. "Ilya," my father said. His voice sounded brittle, like something that had been overheated and cracked. "We need to meet." "No," I said. "This is bigger than feelings," he snapped. "You don't understand what's at stake." "I understand exactly," I replied. "That's why the answer is no." "You're being unreasonable," he said. "We're your parents." "That didn't stop you from committing fraud," I said calmly. Silence. Then quieter. "You don't know what Sloan is mixed up in." "I do," I said, "and it's not mine to fix." "You're condemning her," he said. "No," I replied. "She condemned herself. I just refused to lie for her." He hung up. 10 minutes later, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was soft, trembling, layered with fear. "Ilya, please. We raised you better than this. Families help each other. If you don't intervene, everything we worked for is gone." Everything we worked for. She meant their reputation, their standing, their illusion of control. I forwarded the voicemail to Margaret and blocked the number. At 11, Margaret called again. "They're asking for a meeting," she said, "all of them, together." I leaned back in my chair. "To do what?" "To negotiate silence," she said. "Your father knows the fraud exposure is real. Sloan knows the debt collectors are circling. They want a deal." "What kind of deal?" Margaret didn't answer immediately. "They want you to dissolve the trust," she said finally. "Transfer the house. In exchange, they'll handle everything quietly." I laughed. It wasn't amused laughter. It was disbelief. "They think they still have leverage." "They're counting on your reluctance to destroy them," Margaret said. "They believe you'll choose family harmony over consequences." I thought of my grandfather's hands steady, even when his body failed him. "No," I said, "I won't meet them, and I won't negotiate." "That's not what I'm advising," Margaret said gently. I straightened. "Then what are you advising?" "I'm advising a controlled confrontation," she replied. "On our terms, in my office, with documentation, with witnesses." My pulse picked up. "You think they'll agree?" "They have no alternative," Margaret said. "By tomorrow, this stops being a civil mess and becomes criminal exposure. They know that. Fear makes people compliant." I stared at the ocean through the window. "When?" "Today," she said. "Late afternoon, before Obsidian Ridge makes its next move." I agreed. At 4 o'clock, I drove into town. I didn't feel brave. I felt resolved. Margaret's office was quiet when I arrived. The conference room was prepared with water glasses, folders neatly aligned. The environment was intentional, neutral, controlled. They arrived together. My father looked smaller than I remembered. His confidence had collapsed inward, leaving behind tension and anger with nowhere to go. My mother clutched her purse like a life raft, eyes darting, searching for sympathy. Sloan looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her skin was dull, her movements jittery. The confidence that once defined her was gone, replaced by something raw and frantic. They sat across from me. No greetings. No apologies. Margaret took the head of the table. "We're here to clarify reality," she said, "and then we're done." My father leaned forward. "This has gone too far," he said. "We need to contain it." Margaret slid a folder toward him. "You're past containment," she said. "You're in mitigation." Sloan spoke, then her voice thin. "Ilya, please, I know I messed up. I know I did. But if this goes public, I lose everything." I looked at her. "Everything," I repeated. "Or just the version of yourself you sold people?" Her eyes filled with tears. My mother reached for her hand. Margaret cleared her throat. "Let's be precise. Sloan, you applied for a hard money loan using trust property you did not own. You misrepresented title status. You also attempted to coerce the trustee into vacating the property to facilitate appraisal." Sloan nodded weakly. "Yes," she whispered. Daniel Margaret continued, turning to my father. "You altered bank records and submitted a fraudulent deed for filing. That is identity fraud and forgery." My father's jaw tightened. "Yes," he said. Margaret closed the folder. "You are here because Elia has not yet referred this to the district attorney," she said. "That is not mercy. That is leverage." Silence filled the room. Sloane looked at me with something like terror. "What do you want?" she asked. I didn't answer immediately. I took a breath. "I want distance," I said. "Permanent, legal, enforced." My father frowned. "You want to cut us off?" "I want safety," I replied. "From manipulation, from pressure, from being treated like a tool." Margaret nodded. "The proposal is simple. You acknowledge the validity of the trust. You waive all future claims. You agree to a permanent no-contact order. In return, Elia will not pursue criminal charges for the actions already documented." My mother gasped. "That's blackmail," she said weakly. "No," Margaret replied. "That's consequence management." Sloane swallowed hard. "If we sign, this ends." "With us," I said. "Yes." She looked at my father. He hesitated. Then quietly, "We don't have a choice." The pen slid across the table. And for the first time in my life, I didn't say okay. I waited. The pen sat between us like a loaded weapon. No one reached for it. Not my father, who had always believed hesitation was weakness unless it was his own. Not my mother, whose hands trembled too much to pretend steadiness. Not Sloane, who stared at the paper as if the ink itself might bite her. I watched them closely. This moment mattered more than the signatures themselves, because people reveal who they truly are when they believe they are cornered. "I want to understand something," my father said, finally, his voice tight. "Before we sign away our own daughter." "You already tried to sign her future away," Margaret replied evenly. "This is simply symmetry." He ignored her and looked at me. "When did you decide to turn against us?" I didn't flinch. "I didn't turn against you," I said. "I stopped turning against myself." My mother let out a quiet sob. "We did everything for you." "No," I said. "You did everything for Sloane. I learned to survive on leftovers." "That's not fair," my father snapped. "It's accurate," I replied. Sloane shifted in her seat, rubbing her hands together. "Elia, please, can we not do this right now? We're running out of time." There it was. Not remorse. Urgency. Margaret glanced at her watch. "You have 45 minutes before the next escalation," she said. "After that, this meeting is irrelevant." "What escalation?" my mother whispered. Margaret didn't answer. She didn't need to. Fear fills in blanks better than truth. Sloane leaned forward. "You don't understand what they're like," she said to me. "Obsidian Ridge doesn't wait for lawyers. They don't care about trusts or probate. They care about leverage." "And you thought using Grandpa's house was acceptable leverage," I said. Her mouth opened, closed. "Yes," she admitted, "at the time." "At the time," I repeated, like it was a weather decision. My father slammed his palm on the table. "Enough. This isn't helping anyone. Elia, if we sign this, you're effectively erasing us." "I'm protecting myself," I said. "The fact that it feels like erasure to you should tell you something." Silence stretched. I could hear the hum of the building's air system, the muted sound of traffic outside. Life continuing indifferent. My mother reached for the pen first. Her hand hovered. Then she stopped. "If we sign," she said quietly, "you won't tell anyone." "No," I said, "I won't." "Not the family," she pressed. "They already know you tried to take the house," I said. "They don't know how far you went. That stays buried." She nodded slowly. My father's jaw worked. "This protects Sloane," he said. "It protects you from prison," Margaret corrected. "It protects Sloane from exposure. And it protects Elia from ever being used again." Sloane looked at me, eyes glassy. "I never meant to hurt you." I held her gaze. "That's not comforting," I said. "It's revealing." She flinched. The pen scraped softly as my mother signed. "One signature." The room changed. My father stared at the paper like it was a death certificate. His pride fought visibly with his fear. He signed next. The sound was rough, angry. Then the pen slid to Sloane. Her hands shook so badly that she had to steady them against the table. She hesitated. I could see it. The calculation. The part of her that still believed there might be another way. Margaret leaned forward slightly. "Miss Monroe, if you do not sign, this meeting ends and the fraud report proceeds." Sloane swallowed. She signed. The signature was sloppy, uneven, desperate. Margaret gathered the papers, immediately checking each page with meticulous care. "It's done," she said. My father slumped back in his chair. My mother stared at the table. Sloane stared at me. "You win," she whispered. I shook my head. "This isn't winning," I said. "This is stopping." Margaret stood. "You have 10 minutes to leave the building," she told them. "Any contact after today violates the agreement." My father stood abruptly. "I hope that house keeps you warm," he said bitterly, "because you have no family left." I looked at him. "You should have thought about that before you tried to steal it." They left without another word. The door closed softly behind them. The quiet that followed was different from all the other silences I'd known. It wasn't tense. It wasn't watchful. It was clean. Margaret exhaled. "That was harder than court," she said. "I know," I replied. She gathered the documents into a locked case. They'll spiral for a while, threaten, post passive-aggressive things. But legally, they're finished. And Obsidian Ridge, I asked. She paused. That's out of your hands. They'll pivot to recovery through other means. Sloan will have to face what she did. I nodded. I didn't feel relief. I felt hollow. Grief doesn't disappear when justice arrives. It just changes shape. I drove back to Harbor Point as the sun lowered over the water, the sky bleeding orange and violet into the sea. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same. Gray shingles, white trim, stubborn hydrangeas, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a battleground. It felt like a place I was allowed to stand without apology. I unlocked the door and went inside. No voices followed me, no demands, no guilt. Just the ticking clock and the sound of waves. I sat in my grandfather's chair and closed my eyes. I kept it, I whispered. And for the first time since he died, the silence answered back, not with weight, but with space. But even as calm settled in, I knew one thing for certain. People who lose everything rarely accept it quietly, and Sloan still owed money to people who don't forgive. The first night after the meeting was the quietest night of my life. No buzzing phone, no footsteps outside, no sudden spikes of dread when headlights swept across the walls. I slept with the bedroom window open, letting the ocean air crawl over the sheets and into my lungs. When I woke just before dawn, the house felt settled like an animal that had finally decided I wasn't a threat. That peace lasted exactly 36 hours. On Wednesday morning, Margaret called before I'd finished my coffee. "They've moved," she said. My stomach tightened. "Who?" "Obsidian Ridge," she replied. "Not against you, against Sloan." I closed my eyes. "Define moved," I said. "They froze her remaining accounts yesterday afternoon. This morning, they sent a recovery notice to her office and her residence. Formal, polite, final. And after that," Margaret exhaled slowly, "after that, things stopped being formal." I stared out the kitchen window at the calm water. "So what happens to her?" "That depends," Margaret said, "on whether she has anything left they can take. And if she doesn't, they apply pressure," she said carefully. "Social, professional, reputational, sometimes physical proximity." A chill ran through me. "She's not my responsibility," I said. "I know," Margaret replied. "I'm not calling because of obligation. I'm calling because proximity matters." "What do you mean?" "Desperate people move toward the nearest perceived lifeline," she said. "You are the last asset she associates with safety." The words settled heavy in my chest. "You think she'll come here?" "I think Margaret said that she has already tried everywhere else." That afternoon I locked every door and closed every curtain. Not out of fear, out of clarity. At 6:47 p.m., headlights appeared at the end of the driveway. I didn't need to check the camera. I knew. Sloan stepped out of her car slowly like she was approaching a wild animal. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair pulled back in a way that suggested she hadn't looked in a mirror in days. She didn't knock. She stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the door. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she knocked, softly. "I know you're there," she said. I didn't answer. "I just need 5 minutes," she continued. "I'm not here to fight." I walked to the door but didn't open it. "Leave," I said through the wood. She flinched. "I can't," she replied. "They came to my office today." My hand tightened on the doorknob. "Who?" She laughed bitterly. "Not thugs. Worse. Clean suits, smiling, asking questions my partners couldn't answer. And now my firm suspended me," she said, "effective immediately." I said nothing. She slid down onto the porch steps. "I'm done, Elia," she whispered. "I lost everything." "You lost what you built on lies," I said. "There's a difference." Her voice cracked. "They're not done with me." "I know," I said. Silence stretched between us. The ocean roared in the distance. "I won't let you in," I said finally, "but I'll call someone for you." She looked up sharply. "Who?" "A lawyer," I replied. "A therapist. The police. Pick one." Her face twisted. "You think this is a mental health problem?" "I think it's a consequences problem," I said. "And those are the only people equipped to handle it." She stood abruptly. "So that's it. You're just going to watch." "I'm not watching," I said. "I'm stepping out of the blast radius." Her anger flared. "You always get to be clean. You always get to walk away untouched." I laughed softly. "No, I just stopped covering for you." She stared at the door like she might kick it. She didn't. Instead, she turned and walked back to her car. But she didn't drive away. She sat there. Engine off. Lights out. Waiting. I called Margaret. "She's outside," I said. "She's not leaving." "I'll handle it," Margaret replied. "Stay inside. Do not engage." 20 minutes later, another car pulled into the driveway. Unmarked. 2 officers stepped out, calm, professional. They spoke to Sloan quietly. She gestured wildly, cried, argued. Then she got back into her car and drove away. The officers knocked once to confirm I was safe. I thanked them and locked the door again. That night I didn't sleep, not because of fear, because I finally understood something fundamental. I hadn't just removed myself from my family. I had destabilized a system that relied on me absorbing damage quietly. Systems don't collapse gracefully. They lash out. Thursday morning brought news. Margaret forwarded an article. A regional business blog reported that Sloan Monroe was under internal investigation for financial irregularities at her firm. No details, no charges yet. Just the beginning of a narrative shift. By afternoon, my mother emailed me from a new address. "You've destroyed your sister's life. I hope you can live with that." I deleted it. Then I sat in the study and opened my grandfather's folder. At the very back, behind the legal documents, was a handwritten note I hadn't noticed before. In his careful script it read, "They will try to make you feel cruel for protecting yourself. That's how you'll know you're doing it right." I pressed the paper flat with my palm. Outside, the tide was going out, exposing rocks that had always been there. Sharp, unforgiving, unmoved by who got hurt walking barefoot across them. And for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for bleeding that wasn't mine. By Friday morning, my name had started to circulate. Not loudly, not publicly, quietly. The way reputations move when people don't want to be seen carrying them. Margaret called just after 9. "Someone reached out about the house," she said. I stiffened. "Who?" "A developer," she replied. "Mid-sized, clean record. They heard there was movement." Movement. That was the polite word for upheaval. "I'm not selling," I said immediately. "I know," Margaret said. "I told them that. But they weren't interested in buying." "Then what do they want?" She paused. "They want to partner." I frowned. "On what?" "On preservation," she said. "They specialize in coastal restoration projects, historic homes, tax-advantaged trusts." I leaned back in my chair. Of course. The house wasn't just shelter. It was leverage. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "That you're not entertaining anything until the dust settles," Margaret replied. "But it tells me something important." "What?" "People are watching," she said, "and they're not all predators." That afternoon I drove into town. Not to meet anyone. To be seen. I had learned something in my work. Visibility is a shield when used correctly. I had coffee at the Harbor Cafe where everyone pretended not to look at you while absolutely doing so. I walked the pier. I talked to Mrs. Klein at the hardware store and bought light bulbs I didn't need. Normal. Stable. Uninteresting. That evening my phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown email. No subject line. Just an attachment. I didn't open it. I forwarded it to Margaret. Her reply came minutes later. "Do not open, we're tracing it." 10 minutes after that, another email arrived. This one had words. "You could have ended this quietly. Now it will end publicly." No signature. No threats. Just intent. Margaret called immediately. "Obsidian Ridge," she said. "Or someone acting on their behalf. They're fishing." "For what?" "For leverage," she replied. "They're trying to see if you panic." "I won't," I said. "I know," she replied, "but they don't." The next morning, the pressure shifted again. Saturday. The kind of day when nothing official happens but everything personal does. At 11:30, my mother showed up, alone. I watched from the upstairs window as she stood at the end of the driveway clutching her purse like a shield. She didn't approach the house. She just stood there, waiting. I went downstairs and opened the door. I didn't invite her in. "What do you want?" I asked. Her face looked older than I remembered. Not just lined, hollowed. "I need to talk to you," she said. "Say it there," I replied. She swallowed. "Sloane's gone." My heart skipped. "Gone where?" "I don't know," she whispered. "She left her apartment. She won't answer her phone. Her car was found at a park near the river." Cold flooded my chest. "Have you called the police?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "They say she's an adult. They can't do anything yet." I closed my eyes briefly. "Why are you here?" I asked. My mother's voice broke. "Because she mentioned you. She said if anything happened to her, it would be because you wouldn't help." Anger flared hot and sharp. "She did this to herself," I said, "and you let her." My mother shook her head violently. "She's sick. She's terrified. She needs help. She needs accountability," I replied. "Those are not the same thing." Tears streamed down her face. "If she's hurt, then it won't be because I refuse to commit fraud," I said. "It will be because you taught her that consequences are optional." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. "You're cold," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm clear." She sank onto the gravel sobbing. For a moment, the old reflex screamed at me to pull her up, bring her inside, make tea, absorb the chaos. I didn't. Instead, I said, "If you're worried about Sloane's safety, talk to the police. Talk to a lawyer, not me." She looked up at the house, then at me. "You really won't help," she said. "I already did," I replied, by refusing to lie. She stayed there another minute. Then she stood and walked away. That night, Margaret called again. "They found Sloane," she said. My breath caught, alive. "Yes," she replied. "At a motel 2 towns over. No harm." But she left a message. "For who?" "For you." I closed my eyes. "What did she say?" Margaret hesitated. She said, "If anything happens next, it's on you." The words sat heavy in the air. That night I couldn't escape the question. Was distance still protection when someone was actively unraveling? Or had this crossed into something darker? I sat in the study, the house quiet around me, the ocean restless beyond the windows. For the first time since all this began, doubt crept in. Not about the trust, not about the law, but about what happens when boundaries collide with desperation, and whether refusing to save someone is the same as letting them fall. Sunday morning arrived without ceremony. No threats, no emails, no cars lingering on the road. That was how I knew something was wrong. When chaos stops announcing itself, it has already moved. I woke before dawn, the house quiet in the way only coastal homes are, alive with distant water, but empty of people. I made coffee and didn't drink it. I stood at the kitchen window and watched fog roll in off the Atlantic, swallowing the shoreline inch by inch. At 6:42, my phone rang. "Margaret, I need you to listen carefully," she said. Her voice had lost its professional polish. "Sloan didn't just disappear yesterday." I sat down slowly. "What do you mean?" "She withdrew money," Margaret said. "Large amounts, cash, from 3 different accounts, all within an hour." My stomach tightened. "How much?" "Enough to buy time," she replied. "Not enough to solve anything." "And Obsidian?" "They're aware," Margaret said. "And they're not patient." Silence stretched between us. Then she added, "There's more." I braced myself. "She contacted one of my junior associates last night. Not officially, not through counsel." My jaw clenched. "What did she say?" "She asked whether the trust could be temporarily unwound in exchange for immunity," Margaret said. She used that phrase. Immunity. "She's trying to trade the house for her own safety," I said. "Yes," Margaret replied, "and she's doing it badly." I stood and began pacing. "What did you tell her?" "That the trust is irrevocable," Margaret said, "and that any further contact would be documented." "Good." "But Lila," she continued, "this is escalating. She's not thinking rationally anymore." "I know," I said. "And when people like Obsidian stop believing they'll get paid," Margaret added quietly, "they stop caring about collateral and start caring about pressure." I stopped pacing. "Pressure how?" "Fear," she said. "Reputation, family." The line went quiet. "They won't touch you directly," Margaret continued. "You're too visible, too documented." "But Sloan isn't." I closed my eyes. The image of my sister alone in a motel room surfaced uninvited. Not the confident golden child, not the manipulator. Just a woman who had finally run out of room to run. "What are my options?" I asked. Margaret didn't hesitate. "You hold the line," she said, "and you prepare for fallout." After the call ended, I sat in the study and stared at the trust documents spread across the desk. Every line airtight, every safeguard intact. Legally, I was untouchable. Morally, the ground was shifting beneath my feet. At noon, the knock came. Not loud, not demanding. 3 soft taps. I opened the door to find a man I didn't recognize. Mid-40s. Clean jacket, neutral expression. "Not local." "Ms. Nelson," he said. "I'm just passing through. Thought I'd introduce myself." "Do I know you?" I asked. "No," he said easily. "But you know my employer." Every instinct screamed at once. "I don't conduct business on my porch," I said. He smiled faintly. "This isn't business, it's a courtesy." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "Speak," I said. "Sloan is very stressed," he said. "Stress makes people unreliable." "Leave," I replied. "You could help her," he continued calmly. "And by extension, yourself." "I'm not interested." "That's unfortunate," he said. "Because she's making decisions without you now." My blood ran cold. "What decisions?" "Messy ones," he replied. "Public ones." I took a step closer. "Is that a threat?" He held up his hands. "Information, that's all." "You have 10 seconds," I said. He nodded. "Then here it is. Sloan plans to claim coercion. She intends to tell authorities that you controlled her financially, that the trust was designed to isolate assets from family members under duress." Rage surged. "That's a lie." "Yes," he agreed, "but lies don't need to be true to be damaging. Only loud." I stared at him. "You should stop her," he said, "or she'll force your hand." I didn't blink. "She already did," I replied. He studied my face, then smiled again. "We'll be in touch," he said. "No," I said. "You won't?" He walked away without another word. I went back inside and locked the door. Then I called Margaret. She answered on the first ring. "They sent someone," I said. "I know," she replied. "We saw him leave." "You're watching the house." "Of course," she said. And Lila listened to me carefully. "I'm listening." "Sloan contacted the police this morning," Margaret said. "She filed a preliminary statement." My chest tightened. "For what?" "For emotional coercion," she said. "She claims you threatened her with exposure unless she signed away family access." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "She's projecting." "Yes," Margaret said, "and it won't hold, but it will trigger interviews." "When?" "Tomorrow," she said. "Monday." I leaned back in my chair. The timeline was tightening. "They're trying to make me blink," I said. "Yes," Margaret replied. "They think if they turn this into a spectacle, you'll trade the house for silence." They don't understand, I said. What? That I already chose noise, I replied. Monday morning arrived like a held breath breaking. 2 officers knocked at 8:15. Polite, neutral, by the book. I invited them in. They asked about the trust, the timeline, my relationship with Sloan. I answered calmly, clearly, truthfully. When they left, one of them paused at the door. Off the record, he said, "This looks like someone trying to rewrite their own mistakes." I nodded. That's been her specialty. After they left, I sat alone in the living room. The house felt heavy. Not unsafe, just full. By afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Margaret. "She's spiraling," she wrote, "and Obsidian is distancing themselves." "What does that mean?" I replied. "It means they don't protect liabilities," she said. "They cut them loose." At 5:47, my phone rang again. Sloan. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I answered. "Lila," she sobbed. "Please." "What do you want?" I asked. "I messed up," she cried. "They're backing away. The money's gone. The story's out. I can't fix this." "You already tried," I said. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "I just didn't know how else to survive." I closed my eyes. "You knew," I said quietly. "You just didn't care who paid for it." Silence. "Is there anything left?" she asked. I thought of the house, the trust, the line I had drawn. "Yes," I said. "What?" "The truth," I replied, "and you're finally standing in it." She hung up. That night the ocean was loud, relentless. I stood on the porch and let the wind cut through me. For the first time, I understood something clearly. Revenge wasn't what I was doing. Protection was. I wasn't punishing my sister. I was refusing to sacrifice myself to save her from consequences she earned. And tomorrow, the world would see what happens when a lifetime of favoritism finally runs out of cover. Tuesday morning, the truth stopped whispering. It walked into the room and sat down. At 7:12, Margaret called. "Sloan was arrested last night," she said. I didn't respond immediately. Not because I was shocked, because some part of me had been waiting for the sound of inevitability. For what I asked. "Wire fraud," Margaret replied. "Misrepresentation, attempted coercion, and one more thing." I closed my eyes. "She recorded her call with Obsidian," Margaret said. "She thought it would protect her. It didn't." Of course she did. Sloan always believed documentation was armor as long as she controlled the narrative. "They turned it over," I asked. "Yes," Margaret said. The lender walked away the moment law enforcement got involved. "They don't like daylight." I sat at the edge of the bed, the house quiet around me. "And my parents?" I asked. Another pause. "They weren't arrested," Margaret said. "But they were interviewed. Thoroughly." I exhaled slowly. "What happens now?" "Now," she said, "the machine finishes what it started." By noon, the calls began. News outlets didn't contact me directly. They contacted the town. Whispers moved faster than facts. By early afternoon, the story had a shape. Not a clean one, but a recognizable one. Local real estate professional under investigation. Family dispute escalates into criminal inquiry. Historic coastal property at center of legal storm. My name appeared only once. Described as the trustee. Not the villain. Not the rescuer. Just the anchor point. At 3:30, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. At 4, my mother texted. "Please, we need to talk." I didn't respond. At 5:10, Margaret forwarded me a message from the district attorney's office. "No charges pending against you. Your cooperation is noted. You are not required to appear." I read it twice. Then I stood and walked through the house. The floorboards creaked softly under my feet. The late light fell across the walls the same way it always had. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had. That evening, I sat in the study with a single lamp on. I didn't open my laptop. I didn't check my phone. I just sat with the quiet. I thought about Sloan. About how everything had always bent toward her. How consequences had slid past her like water off glass. Until now. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something steadier. Acceptance. At 8:43, there was another knock. Not soft this time. Measured. Controlled. I opened the door to find my parents. Together. Smaller than I remembered. Older. My mother's eyes were swollen. My father's shoulders sagged. "We're not here to fight," my father said. I stepped aside but didn't invite them in. They remained on the porch. "Say what you came to say," I replied. My mother spoke first. "We didn't know how bad it was," she said. "With Sloan, with the money. You knew enough," I said. My father swallowed. "We thought we could fix it." "No," I replied calmly. "You thought you could hide it." Silence stretched. "She's going to prison," my mother whispered. "That depends," I said. "On her choices, on her honesty." "She's terrified," my mother said. "She should be," I replied. My father looked at me then. Really looked. "I don't recognize you," he said. "That's because you never looked," I replied. The words landed heavy. "I raised you," he said weakly. "You managed me," I said. "There's a difference." My mother reached out, stopping herself just short of touching my arm. "What do you want from us?" she asked. I considered the question. "I want distance," I said. "I want no more triangulation, no more pressure, No more rewriting. And if we can't, my father asked, then the silence becomes permanent, I replied. My mother nodded slowly. My father looked away. We made mistakes, he said. Yes, I replied, and now you live with them. They stood there a moment longer. Then my mother whispered, I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. But it was something. They left without another word. I closed the door and locked it. That night sleep came easily. Not because everything was resolved, but because nothing was unresolved anymore. Wednesday morning, Margaret called one last time. The trust is clean, she said. No challenges, no appeals. The property is secure. Thank you, I replied. You did this, she said. I just documented it. After the call, I made coffee and sat on the porch. The ocean stretched wide and indifferent before me. It had watched all of this. It would watch what came next. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who apologized for taking space, the one who said okay to keep the peace. She didn't live here anymore. This house wasn't just shelter. It was proof that silence could be chosen, that boundaries could hold, that walking away wasn't weakness, it was discernment. I didn't know what would happen to Sloan. I didn't know what my parents would tell the rest of the family. I didn't care, because for the first time in my life, the story wasn't being told about me. It was being told without me, and that was the most powerful position I had ever occupied. The first morning after everything ended did not feel victorious. It felt quiet in a way that made space instead of filling it. I woke just after sunrise, not because of anxiety, not because of unfinished business, but because my body no longer needed to stay on alert. The house breathed around me. The ocean moved as it always had, indifferent to human drama, steady in its refusal to be impressed. I made coffee and carried the mug out to the porch. For the first time since I arrived, there were no cars on the road. No strangers watching, no legal deadlines, no incoming calls waiting to demand something from me. Just salt air and time. I thought about Sloan, not with anger, not even with sadness, with distance. Margaret had emailed late the night before. Sloan had been released on bond, charges pending, her professional license suspended, the kind of consequences that don't explode all at once but follow you for years, quietly closing doors. She would tell her version of the story, of course. She always did. But this time it wouldn't matter, because the truth had paperwork, and witnesses, and timestamps. My parents had not contacted me again. That silence felt deliberate, not respectful, strategic. They were recalculating their world without access to mine. Good. By mid-morning, I walked through the house with a notebook. Not the legal one, a clean one. I stood in the living room and wrote a list. Roof inspection, heating system upgrade, trust-funded maintenance reserve, local preservation grant application. Not dreams, plans. The house didn't need rescuing. It needed stewardship. That afternoon, I drove into town again. Not to be seen this time. To participate. I met with the Historical Society, signed preliminary paperwork for landmark consideration. The woman behind the desk smiled when she saw the address. That house has good bones, she said, and history. Yes, I replied, it does. At the grocery store, someone recognized me. Not from the news, from the cafe. You're the one staying at the Reed place, she said casually. Yes, I answered. That's a lot to take on, she said not unkindly. I know, I replied, but it's worth it. She nodded satisfied. That was it. No judgment, no curiosity, just acknowledgement. That evening, I sat in the study as the light faded. I took the brass key from the drawer, the one my grandfather had given me, for when you need to be sure. I turned it over in my hand. He had known, not everything, but enough. He had known I would be tested. He had trusted me not because I was obedient or agreeable, but because I paid attention, because I noticed patterns, because I understood that love without boundaries is just another form of neglect. I didn't miss my parents the way I once thought I would. I missed the idea of them. I missed the version of family I had been promised but never received. Letting go of that illusion hurt more than letting go of them, but it also freed me. Later that night, I wrote one last entry in the old logbook. Not for evidence, for closure. The betrayal did not break me. It clarified me. I am not responsible for saving people who would burn me to stay warm. I closed the book and put it away. The story was finished. Not because everyone got what they deserved, but because I stopped participating in the lie. Before bed, I stood at the window. The moonlight stretched across the water, pale and steady. I thought about the audience listening to this story. Women who had been told to be quiet, to be patient, to understand. Women who had swallowed injustice to keep the peace. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was about refusal. Refusing to surrender your dignity for approval. Refusing to be the solution to someone else's destruction. Refusing to say okay when okay cost you everything. The house stood behind me, solid, unmoved. It would outlast the noise. So would I. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been pushed out with smiles instead of shouting, "I see you." If you've ever been told your silence was maturity, I understand. And if you're standing at the edge of a decision where saying no feels like losing everything, remember this. Sometimes no is how you finally keep something. Yourself. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Like the video if it helped you breathe a little easier. Subscribe if you want more stories where karma doesn't rush but it always arrives. And share this with someone who needs to hear that walking away isn't weakness. It's survival.